Project HELIOGENESIS Chapter 1. Returned. I hadn't returned to the HELIOGENESIS station in 6 years. Since leaving the project, I avoided all news about the new sun. I cut myself off from colleagues, from science, from anything that reminded me of those final council sessions. I stood up and walked out before signing the closing protocol. And yet, this morning, I put on a consortium-marked suit once again and stepped through the airlock, past the spot where my calculations once stood, where now the second sun of Earth glows. The reason for my return lay in decrypted telemetry and one anonymous message I received 3 days ago. The sender's name glared in the header. Aaron Price. He was my partner on the project. Dead for 2 months now, officially, from decompression sickness after an unscheduled EVA, but it was his hand, his voice, in the final fragment. If you're reading this, I didn't make it back. Lucian, you were right. It's unstable. It's much worse. The gravitational aperture is shifting. Check layer K9. They hit it. Layer K9, one of the innermost gravimetric rings used to monitor field deformation near the artificial star. Only the station's engineering sector and Level 1 analysts had access to it, and I, disgraced, discharged, clearance revoked, but I'd kept something in old diagnostic package, archived before I left, back when we still argued over the Lens-Bowman model. Back then, it seemed a theoretical risk. If an artificial heliosource introduced asymmetry into the field, even within acceptable bounds, it could accumulate over time, first in nanonewtons, then millimeters. A century later, planetary drift. I said allowing error was criminal. They called me paranoid. Now I'm seeing the first deviations on my own laptop. Millimeters, but not drifting from the station. Drifting away from the sun. The station looked different now. Not like a lab, like a cathedral. The dome of the technical ring shimmered in ultraviolet. Helioradiation broke through frequency-adaptive filters, casting long, stark shadows. The spectrum, unnaturally white, in a warmth of solar yellow. No familiar tint of life. People moved like priests, not scientists. N01 looked up. If they already knew. What shines above is not ours. They didn't ask questions when I boarded. My old badge still worked, which meant either they hadn't erased me, or they had been expecting me. Dr. Ward? A young technician in gray uniform approached. Dr. Yoon will see you now. Ella, we hadn't spoken since the vote to activate the reactor. She had been the best climatologist in the consortium. Back then, she chose stability. I chose doubt. We met in a corridor where the walls had been replaced with transparent panels. Beyond them, light. Not the sun, but it, the synthetic core, Earth's second lantern, held artificially on the brink of stability. You came, she said softly, without a smile. I got the message. I know. We all knew you'd return. Sooner or later. She handed me a flash drive, metal casing, unmarked. These are the raw logs. K9, nonlinear fluctuations, added parameters that don't go through the public channels. Official charts are altered. It's coming straight from Hoffman. I met her. Eyes. So you don't believe in the light anymore? She nodded slowly. I never believed in eternity, but now I see. We didn't launch a sun. We built a trap. Chapter 2. Analysis. I spent the night in the observation sector. An abandoned module no one lived in anymore. A cot, covered in dust. A cracked display panel. A narrow viewing port that had always shown just one thing. The synthetic sun, slowly spinning in its gravitational snare. Official records claimed its light was neutral. Balanced, like a projected star. But even through the protective filter, I felt discomfort. Something was wrong with that glow. Too even, too static, like a morgue lamp. The flash drive Ella had given me launched without a password. Inside were several folders. Archive telemetry.k9 was the key. I loaded it into an old visualization rig connected to my laptop. The screen shimmered with fine lines, gravitational waves recorded by laser interferometry. At first glance, they looked ordinary. Solar activity, lunar motion, ionospheric drift, but then I enabled background subtraction mode. Point 1 curve remained, and it was growing smoothly, constantly, without a single spike. 0.009 millimeters per year. A vector shift in Earth's center of mass, away from heliogenesis's gravitational singularity. In 10 years, 1 centimeter in 100, orbital resonance collapse. The moon will drift off course, tidal waves will emerge, axial tilts will shift, and then thermal death. I clenched my fists. They knew. This data couldn't be accidental. Someone inside the project had known from the start. By morning, I met Ella in the Dome archive. Access was restricted, but she brought me in through an internal channel, via the sealed biometric network around us. Holograms projected Earth's past, before the Helio era. Forests, waterfalls, cities drowned in sunsets. Everything that no longer existed. Now, the climate was simulated, regulated by orbital mirror arrays and synthesized wind systems. I verified your calculations, Ella said, not looking at me. They match. We've got independent data from the southern hemisphere, same anomaly. Then why isn't anyone talking about it? She gave a bitter smile. Because heliogenesis isn't just an energy source. It's a symbol, a religion, for the new world. Shutting it down would mean admitting humanity failed, again. After the climate collapse, after the time of great darkness, they can't endure another fall of faith. So, they'll just let it keep going? No, they have a plan B. But you won't like it. She pulled out another data drive, this one encrypted. This file, it's what Aaron was working on. He found more than just gravitational anomalies. He discovered a secondary circuit, something embedded in the stability compensation system. I don't fully understand it, but at the core is a gravitational response to exomass. The device built into heliogenesis draws mass from outside. Planets, asteroids, possibly even moons. We're not generating that we're consuming. I straightened. You mean it's pulling matter from other systems? Exactly. And someday, someone will notice, someone for whom gravity is also home. Later, alone, I loaded Aaron's file into a secure sandbox. His voice returned, not a recording, but as if he were still beside me. Emotionless, clear, as always. You were right, Lucian. But not even you could have guessed the cost. I saw the source. I connected directly. And do you know what I felt? It's alive. Not in the way of thought, but in the way of instinct. It wants to grow. It seeks equilibrium, but not ours, not Earth's. I stared into the void beyond the glass, and I understood. If we don't stop heliogenesis, it won't just destroy Earth. It will rewrite the very structure of the universe to suit itself. Project Heliogenesis Chapter 3 Resistance. The Council had convened an extended session, a rare occurrence. And a troubling sign. 7 people sat at the semicircular table, a rotating holographic model of the heliocore behind them, simulating stability. I knew it was an illusion. So did they. Dr. Ward. The chair began. You've been absent for a long time. You're not part of the project anymore. Why should we even consider your data? I raised my eyes to the spectral cutaway of the compensator, hovering above the console. Because the data is valid. Because the K9 layer shows gravitational instability, and the vector fields display shifts that can't be explained by plasma activity or magnetic deviation. And because if we keep ignoring it, the compensator will lose anchor. Silence settled over the chamber. Then Hoffman, one of the senior curators, replied dryly. We reviewed the telemetry. Tolerances are within limits. Your conclusions are outside the consensus. You're using filters that cut out local peaks. Your model zeroes out signals beyond a fixed threshold. What you have isn't real data, just what matches your expectations. That's speculation. That's mathematics, I snapped. And math doesn't care. You're ignoring the correlation between load vector and synchronous drifting mass. If it's not the compensator, then what is it? One of the council members leaned back in their chair. Your calculations are based on a restricted protocol. You had no authorization to access it. I saw their move, not to challenge the findings, but the process, dismissing the problem by calling it a procedural violation, then release the data. Show the full sequence from the past 6 months. Complete spectrum. No smoothing. No response, just a slight tension in their posture. 2 hours later, I stood at the outer airlock of the engineering sector. Ella had sent me an encrypted tag. Night. Path open. Sector D2. She'd found a way around the protocols. The inner corridors hadn't been maintained in ages. Panels were removed for diagnostics and never replaced. Everything here whispered the same truth. The station wasn't a triumph of science, but a compromise. Haste. Pressure. Unmodeled variables. I descended toward the compensator's reactor node, not the core, but the control subsystems. Using a portable interface, I jacked into the station network. The menu opened a hidden engineering protocol, accessible only to senior designers. There, I found an emergency option. Disengage primary mass anchor. Restricted. Not executable. Only viewable. I opened the log. Last access, 7 months ago. Someone had seen this before. Someone tried to act, and then went silent. Now I knew why. If the anchor is released, the system destabilizes instantly. Heliogenesis will lose its fixation point, and gravitational interference will tear through the fusion shell. The light will go out. Winter will fall on Earth. But if we leave it as is, over decades, the compensator will keep draining mass from the orbital frame, triggering a slow but irreversible gravitational shift. The result? Catastrophe, just postponed. I disconnected. There was no decision yet. Only realization. On the way back, Ella waited in the shadows near the lock. She spoke softly. There's a backup data block. They keep it off network. On the orbital relayed an archive of the original models. Before editing. You need to see it. I nodded. Breaking in would be hard. But without that data, we're blind. And heliogenesis has already begun to bend the orbit. Chapter 4. Breach. Reaching the orbital segment Helio Sigma was no trivial task. After the launch phase ended, the station had been officially placed in autonomous mode, with restricted access, minimal crew support, and strict docking authorization. But Ella knew where to knock. She brought us up on a Prometheus 11 class transport module, an old maneuvering vessel, used during the early stages of the compensator's construction. Decommissioned, repurposed, and scrubbed from the central registry, that we ascended quietly, nearly blind, avoiding the automatic tracking channels. Sigma has a shadow lock, she said, checking the vector alignment. Maintenance bay on the lower arc of the structure. Support teams used it at night, off main shift hours. It was never logged in the official records, but I still have the access key. I looked at the monitor. The orbital station was drawing near, a massive arc, warped under the compensator's pull, as if frozen in a moment of gravitational surge. Sectors C and D were shrouded in darkness. Thermal signatures, minimal, a near dead body. Docking was smooth. The magnetic clamp engaged cleanly. We entered through the lock, leaving Prometheus on auto standby. Ella moved with confidence, as if she still worked here. I followed, noting how gravity was subtly changing, not sharply, but just enough for the brain to register the drift. This is where the coordinates start warping, she murmured. None of the models explain it. It's just micro-displacements begin. The metal behaves like it's being stretched across a bent plane. We reached the archival sector. In front of us, a sealed bulkhead and an old console. Ella hooked in a handheld decoder, entered commands. The system prompted a bioscan. She placed her palm on the pad. I still have level 2 engineering clearance. Bureaucracy's slow. Thankfully, no one bothered to purge it. The door groaned open. Inside, dry cold. The environmental systems ran in low power mode. Lighting, dim. Emergency level point. One of the racks held a terminal. System readout. Backup. Sector. Access key. Sigma C/origin. I sat at the interface and began to search. The archive was massive, dozens of terabytes. But among them, I found the original gravitational calculations for the compensator, the ones prepared before it ever went. Online, my eyes locked onto the lines, as if staring again at the naked vectors. There they were. These datasets wouldn't pass any filter, I muttered. Here's the critical threshold. Energy divergence exceeds projections by the third cycle. And this was before activation. So they knew, and suppressed it, or ignored it, or worse, altered the final tables and pushed a flawed model into assembly. These equations are missing feedback pressure accounting. It leaks into the stabilizers, slowly tearing the orbit apart. I started copying the data, opened an external channel to my personal drive. Transfer was slow, obsolete interfaces, protected sectors. Then, failure. The system flickered and a message appeared on screen. Access locked. Incident report initiated. Protocol stonewall triggered. Ella froze that I looked up. They found us. Somewhere in the corridor, a clicked an automatic lock. Someone, or something, had activated defenses from the central node that we weren't alone. Chapter 5. Revelation that we ran through the station's airlocks. Lit only by emergency lights. The security system had partially engaged. Automated barriers sealed off corridors. But it seemed someone, or something, had switched to manual control. We don't have much time, Ella whispered, eyes on the schematic. The archive triggered an alert, but if we reach the engineering core, I can reboot the comms relay. We need to send the data out. We took a detour, bypassing one of the internal lifts that I could feel the space around us subtly distorted. The compensator, even in idle mode, still warped local gravity. Ella nodded toward a pressured door marked Sector N, Power Input / Stabilizer. Anchor. This way. It's one of the gravitron channels. We can use it as a bridge to the main section. The corridor led into a hangar lined with massive cylinders, semi-transparent capsules suspended in magnetic fields. Each housed a rotating core encased in a gel-like shell. Unidentified elements, pulsing slowly, like dying stars trapped in glass. I stepped closer on the interior curve of one capsule, faint lettering. Exocore, HN 113/Kepler. A chill ran through me. I looked up at the next capsule. Exocore, Trappist B/Anchor 03. This can't be real. Ella said nothing. She scanned the control panels, searching for confirmation. These aren't experimental models, Ward. They're planetary cores, harvested from distant exoworlds, inserted into the gravitational schema like gyroscopes. Stability, built from broken systems. I could barely speak. You're telling me heliogenesis is stabilized by destroying other planets? Yes. Microscopic tunnels, hollow conduits, annihilation of local gravity wells. They rip a planet from the inside, leave behind a hollow husk. All for energy. I stared at the system's balance projection. A holographic model of the solar stabilizer hovered in front of us. Beneath it, 7 anchors, each labeled with the name of an exoplanet, all matched. The calculations we downloaded from the archive had no mention of stabilizer anchors, because that data had been scrubbed, replaced with forged specs on synthetic arrays. So this wasn't a miscalculation, I whispered. This was a sacrifice. Ella nodded. A sacrifice of entire worlds. For the sake of one, ours. The alarm pulsed. Our AI voice echoed through the corridor. Unauthorized presence detected. Containment protocols activated. Central team dispatched. I tightened my grip on the data drive. They're not going to let us leave. Ella looked at me with grim resolve. Then we're not leaving. We're going deeper. To the command core. There's a black channel there. An unfiltered uplink. We can transmit everything. And if we're lucky, reach the launch core. I nodded. This wasn't just a scientific experiment. It was a crime against the stars. And we couldn't stay silent anymore. Chapter 6. Bluff or Truth. The channel opened just as we reached the station's core. A deep technical shaft bathed in crimson light from the reserve grav panels. Ella was configuring the black transmission link, While I struggled to bypass the fallback lock on my data drive, the screen flickered to life. Ward, can you hear me? Hoffman's voice was calm, even polite that he sat in the shadows, but I recognized the tone, that deliberate, clinical coldness. I know where you are, and you know you're out of time. We both understand there's too much at stake to let it all collapse over a few digits. I said nothing, but he continued. I saw what you took, the original models, and I think you figured out the anchors, the exocores, but you're still missing the key piece. My body tensed. We're not destroying planets, Ward. We're retrieving cores from dead worlds, burned out, barren, that we scan them during gravitational collapse and transfer only what can still be salvaged, that we're not executioners, that we're the last response unit. Ella looked at me, questioning. I held up a hand. Wait. Hoffman leaned in. You don't believe me. I get it. But ask yourself, if you could save one world by cannibalizing the remnants of another, no life, no civilizations left, wouldn't you do it? I clenched my jaw. You're offering moral clearance for murder? He gave a slight laugh. I'm offering a way out, that you're not a terrorist, Ward. And I'm not a villain. We're just engineers, each on a different floor. A pause. There's a project. Helios evacuation. Contingency fleet. Ships, resources, personnel. Only the best. You could be part of it. You and Ella. I turned to her. She looked away, already understanding. Hoffman stayed composed. Just hand over the key. Cancel the broadcast. We'll say you died during maintenance. It'll all go away. You won't be a hero, but you'll be alive. The transmission indicator blinked. Ella entered the coordinates for an independent comm, node .1 last chance, .1 final decision point. I looked at the drive in my hand. It the compensator schematic, the signatures of exoplanets erased without witnesses, and I said, I'm not here to survive, Hoffman, that I'm here to answer for it. He sighed, pity. The signal cut, and the station's frame began to shudder. Hoffman had triggered reverse isolation protocol. He was erasing evidence, and us with it. Ella slammed her hand down on a switch. Ward, we either trigger the destructive circuit, or we die here as another invisible loss. I nodded. In the next moment, I inserted the drive into the central interface. A menu of emergency procedures appeared. One stood out, masked with system blackout. Markers, protocol, null SNK activates gravitational self-collapse of compensator. Irreversible. I looked at her. She said, simply, do it. Chapter 7, Rebellion. When I confirmed activation of protocol null sync, the console froze. For a moment, complete silence. Even the cooling systems went quiet. Then the station exhaled. A metallic groan echoed through its entire frame. The gravitational circuits began to collapse. Shifting into an unstable phase, the core of the compensator was now devouring itself, sinking into a man-made gravity well. It's happening, Ella whispered. We've triggered the chain reaction. Sections began shutting down across. The monitors, cameras showed the station's inner segments being pulled inward, as if consumed by an invisible mass. This wasn't an explosion, it was implosion. A miniature black hole, born in metal and fired. We ran from the core, heading for the emergency exit. Communication modules began dropping around us, their magnetic suspensions torn free in bursts of sparks. The system's voice broadcast kicked in. Core instability detected. Initiating automatic lockdown. All bridges will seal in 180 seconds. The nearest path to the docking bay? I shouted. Upper airlock. Ella called back. But the system's already sealing it. We veered into a maintenance tunnel. Heat, vibrations all around us. The sensation was overwhelming, like the station was alive and dying at the same time. A section junction, sealed airlock, and in front of it stood a man in black uniform. I recognized him immediately. He held a sidearm, but didn't raise it. His eyes, exhausted, filled with the same bitter fatigue that lived inside me. You really did it, he said. I nodded. Not for glory. For truth. He looked at us, 1 second, 2, then lowered the weapon. stepped to the panel, and entered an override code. The airlock clicked. Unsealed. You've got less than 2 minutes. Straight ahead to the engineering lift. But just so you know, he turned his head slightly. I read those files too, and I can't keep watching us devour other worlds. He pulled out a second data drive. There's a manual switch in the core. Final step requires a physical trigger. The launch code is buried. I'll give it to you. Why are you helping us? I asked. Because someone has to, someone inside. Ella reached out, grabbed his hand. Come with us. Sato shook his head. Someone has to shut the door. And then he was gone, back into the crimson-lit depths of a collapsing station that we jumped into the lift shaft. IT ran on residual power. The cabin groaned into motion, and I could hear, one by one, compensator sections going offline behind us. That we were leaving a dying world, a world built by human hands, made to cheat nature. But the lie had grown too heavy, and now it was falling apart. Chapter 8. The Choice. The engineering lift jolted to a stop. Final section before the core, a heavy bulkhead, guarding the manual override zone for protocol null sync. There, at the station's heart, waited the last input node, a console cut off from all networks. A security measure in case of rebellion. Or truth. The lights above flickered. The air was hot, storm-heavy. A thin hum swelled. The sound of a newborn singularity starting to breathe. The compensator had entered collapse. That IT was already eating itself. We've got no more than 8 minutes, Ella said, scanning the readout. Then the station folds in, and every gram of mass disappears. Us included. We advanced through the scorched corridor, sparks beneath our feet, ruptured cables snaking overhead. Every step echoed through the dying steel. The console was housed in a glass capsule, old, dust-coated. 3 levers and 1 keypad. No security. But 1 prompt, a 6-character code, given to us by Sato. I entered the first 3. The panel scanned my biosignature. Accepted. Then Ella entered hers. The system blinked, then powered on. On screen, final confirmation. Destructive phase activation. Consumption will begin immediately. Confirm. Ward, she whispered. If we do this, it's over. The station, the project, the network, and the way back, gone too. I stared at the screen, feeling nothing of my own body anymore. I know, and I still confirm. I reached for the panel, and it froze. Suddenly, the system locked. A foreign protocol appeared on the screen. Interference. Remote core lockdown. Control overridden. Ella recoiled. Hoffman. The comms flared, distorted, but clear. You went too far. I thought you'd fall back. But now you're a threat. So, manual control is disabled. The station will be sealed. Without the final impulse, you die. The compensator will be restored elsewhere. Without you. My hands clenched. He wasn't just locking us out, that he was erasing the rebellion itself. So that no one would ever know. But then, beneath the panel, a second prompt blinked to life. From Sato. Off protocol access. A backup path. Only 1 input. Only 1 chance. I looked at Ella. She nodded. N-O words. I typed the code by hand. 6 characters. The old designation of the tech unit we once served in together. Our shared code. The panel accepted it. The display flared. Null sync confirmed. No return possible. At that moment, I felt the station tremble. Its inner contours folded. Faster, harder. Gravitational fields tore like silk. That we both knew. There was no way out now. Ella took my hand. Better to die in truth than live in lies. We watched as the light below began to collapse. The massive compensator folded inward, devouring every error, every fear, every deception. The station vanished, and with it, the shadow of the second sun. Chapter 9. Heliofall. 6 years have passed. The sky looks strange now. At sunset. You can see a second halo, a shadow of light frozen in the upper atmosphere. Scientists call it a residual gravitational imprint. Others say it's matter remembering. But for us, it's a reminder of those who never came back. Project Heliogenesis was officially shut down. The archives, destroyed. The station, listed as lost in an accident. No details were ever released. No names. No blamed. No heroes. But I know the truth that I survived. An escape pod activated under a fallback protocol. That a hull breach threw me into open space. That by pure chance. One of the autonomous probes picked up the emergency ping. That I woke up on Earth's orbital station. Alone, Ella stayed behind. Until the end. That I don't speak of her in interviews. That I don't name her. That I offer no proof. Because when the station began to collapse, everything we knew about sacrifice became too personal to share. The world is slowly healing. The last energy vectors have been dismantled. The old allocations cleaned up. New energy systems are built on sustainable principles. People have started listening to the voices that once whispered. And when they look up, many now remember that light, too bright, can burn children sometimes. Ask, what is that strange glow in the clouds? I tell them, it's a reflection of what once was. It doesn't warm. It doesn't shine. It warns. And so ends the era we once hoped would be a new beginning. And so begins Heliofall, a warm, quiet season when there is only one sun, and it is enough.